and we're going to have to look at the structure through which it's free falling. This is 90,000 tons of structural steel. There's more steel here in the perimeter particularly than glass. And in fact, if we look at the, if we take a magical crane and hold up two massive sections of building identical to the 15-story section above the point of jet plane impacts in the North Tower, and we release these all at once, you can see intuitively, this is 7th grade physics here, the one on the right will fall faster. Why? It has no resistance underneath it. The one on the left had 80 or 70,000 tons of structural steel underneath it. To help us understand that is Tony Szamboti. Tony's done some incredible work here. Tony?
Is this on?
Yeah, just pull it closer.
Yeah, there's just a few slides here. I just wanted to mention you can't drive your car as fast as these buildings came down. Anybody, guys here that were in the drag racing when they were younger, 2/3 of gravitational acceleration would give you about 11.2 second quarter-mile speed. I don't think most cars today on the road can do better than 16, 17 seconds. You can't drive that fast. At any rate, what happens here is, of course, David mentioned, there's no deceleration. And you see his graph up there on the right. And, of course, the on the left, they're from a fellow by the name of Szamboti, civil engineering professor from Northwestern, who claims that we had this deceleration. He called it a powerful jolt. And that can, in fact, buildings are built with a factor of safety. You know, you don't just build it just so it can handle the load. There's a factor of safety there. In the towers, the core columns could handle a static load. They had a 3-to-1 factor of safety, and the perimeter 5-to-1 because they also needed to handle seismic and wind loads. So the actual weight of the building can't collapse it. It would have to impact it. And you get this amplified load in the impact because it's the static load of mass times gravity plus the mass times the deceleration. And that's what the hammer does when it transfers that extra momentum. If you don't have a deceleration, you can't be transferring it, and David said that very succinctly earlier. You can go to the next slide, Richard. All right, this is, if you can play this, you'll see a lot of people try to say, well, the columns would have missed each other. This graphic shows you they wouldn't. They would go right through each other. They're in line. And the mass of that upper section was 12 stories, about 73 million pounds. So it's not moving to the side. Inertia alone would keep it in line with the bottom. There's no lateral forces to move that whole upper section of the building to the side. So it's going to, the columns are going to be aligned, and if they hit each other, you're going to get a deceleration. That's how it could possibly collapse. But they would have to decelerate because the columns would absorb a lot of energy, and you would have saw it slowing. It doesn't slow at all. And the proof of this is something here that's very interesting. In about 2007, the French started doing a demolition technique where they did not use explosives. They used this impulse energy, and they took out 2 or 3 stories of columns with hydraulic rams. But you're going to see, in this case, you're going to have a deceleration. So I think is there a video here? Maybe there's not.
No video.
There's no video. But you're going to see on the left is the building before it collapses on the upper left, and the lower left is after it starts. And David Chandler actually did this measurement on the upper right, and you'll see it decelerates. It doesn't just keep coming straight down like the one for World Trade Center 1. You can go to the next slide. Okay, this is Szamboti, the civil engineering professor. When you actually get into what he did, and we have written, there's been a couple rebuttals of his work that were sent to the ASCE journal he published in, and they rejected him after 27 months as out of scope. They could not deny the soundness of our analysis. They simply said it's out of scope. How can you be out of scope replying to a discussion, to a paper that they published? But this is what you're up against.
Tony, really, isn't it true that the entire NIST report initiation of collapse was developed on this page, this multi-page paper that came out by Szamboti just 2 days after 9/11?
Right. Let me get into that.
Okay.
Szamboti actually first submitted this paper. He called it the World Trade Center Collapse Analysis Simple Analysis. World Trade Center Collapse Simple Analysis. He submitted it to the Journal of Engineering Mechanics, which is one of the ASCE's journals on September 13th, 2001. That's quite right. He called it a rapid communication. I'd say it was rapid. 2 days later, to be able to figure this out. At any rate, what he does, we look through it. We really torn this apart. He overestimates the gravity load on the columns by 76% because he uses the maximum design load. It's like if you had a car accident where one person was in it, then you did the forensics as though 5 people were in it, you had a full trunk and all that. Well, it wouldn't be accurate. But this is what he does. He uses the maximum design load. That's not what was on the buildings. What's on the buildings is called the actual service load. And it was, the actual service load of the upper section was 33 million kilograms. He used 54 or 58 million kilograms, depending on which paper he used. He did it in. He used a different number of stories. Then he underestimates the velocity loss due to conservation of momentum by over 600%, because he says the upper section only hits the concrete slab, not all the other material. We can prove this because he said it only weighed 627,000 kilograms, but in his paper he has it as 3.87 million. So this is just silly stuff that can be proven. He overestimates the kinetic energy. He has the first story falling in free fall. David Chandler's measurement shows it's at about 51% of free fall in the first story. That makes a big difference because kinetic energy is a function of velocity squared. So it was actually, at the end of the first story, it was coming down at 6.1 meters per second. Square that, you get about 36, 37. Zednik-Bazan has it coming down at 8.5 meters per second. Square that, you have 72. So he's doubling the kinetic energy with the velocity. He's doubling it with the mass. That's 4 times. And then, ultimately, he then underestimates the column strength below and its ability to absorb energy by at least 300%. So this man has actually embellished this whole thing to make it look like it was collapsible. It's unfortunately, it's not legitimate. And I think it's fraudulent. And I wrote him an open letter this past June, and he did not respond. He has responded, however, I'll just say this. He has responded to people with inane or highly unsupported arguments. The ASC, at the same time, they would not respond or publish our discussion, okay, which was legitimately critical. They published the discussion which was saying the South Tower was falling at 4 times the rate of gravity. And they let him have a field day responding to that, but they wouldn't publish our discussion. That just tells you what's going on at DIC. They're suppressing legitimate criticism.